Turn to Job chapter 9. Kind of glad we're past Bildad. He is starting to get on my nerves. I'm sure he got on Job's nerves. Well, Job's going to answer him. In Job chapter 9, starting, let's see. Let's read Job chapter 8, starting at verse 20. Just read the last few verses there. And then let's read Job 9, verse 1 and 2. It says, "Behold, God will not cast away a perfect man, neither will he help the evildoers, till he fill thy mouth with laughing and thy lips with rejoicing. They that hate thee shall be clothed with shame, and the dwelling place of the wicked shall come to naught." Then Job answered and said, I know it is so of a truth, but how shall man be just with God? So the first thing that Job does is he acknowledges what Bildad is saying is true. Now, the application of it is a whole different matter. Who he's applying it to is not... See, you can be stating the truth, but you could be accusing the wrong person. The things he's saying are true. God does not cast away a perfect person. And if Bildad had known that Job was considered a perfect person in the eyes of God as far as being mature, not sinless, he never would have aimed it at Job. And he was. And so Job has to admit that, you're speaking the truth. Job also knows this. He knows that there are no sinless men. There are no sinless men. And there are very few perfect ones. How many times do we find where God says a man's perfect? Not very often. In fact, Job might be the only one in the Bible where it says that he was perfect. I don't know, can anybody think of another one where it says they're perfect and upright? Thinking there might be one more, but I don't. Test everybody's brain here. Get all these. I can't think of one. Noah. There you go, was perfect in his generation. Now, that might have been in reference to there was no angelic meddling of his seed. Because that's the reason God saved him, because they weren't contaminated with angelic seed. And that may be why he was perfect in his generation. But where he says here they're perfect and, what does he say about Job? Upright? Man was perfect and upright and one that feared God and eschewed evil. Job considers that if his belief and efforts were not good enough, then whose is? Now, I know that might be braggadocious on his part. That might even be a little self-righteous on his part. But he also knows that he knows what he's been doing for the Lord. He knows the sacrifices he's been making. He knows the prayers he's been praying. He knows. Okay? And his friends don't. Your friends, listen, your friends can see you and maybe they'll catch you on a bad day or something. Maybe they'll catch you in a bad situation where there's a lot of stress on you, and they see you in an imperfect manner. They don't know your relationship with God. And the vice versa is true. You might look good. You might, act well, but then, when you get out of this place, you're in terrible condition. I don't know. It's hard to tell. It's hard to tell unless you're around somebody for a while. It's hard to tell even then exactly what's going on. And, there is no sinless people in this place. Okay? And till you drop dead, you're not going to be sinless. But you can be as perfect as you can be. That is upright. Job knows that about himself. I guess, I don't know. The Bible says if you compare yourselves among yourselves, you're not wise. That's exactly what Job has done. He's not comparing himself to God. He says, who can contend with God? In fact, he's going to say that in the next verse. But he's looking at those three friends. He's looking at them and going, I know I live better than you do. I know I do. I know I got a better relationship with God than you. I know that I do. And in his heart, he knows. So that's the reason why he says, I know it is so of a truth, but how should man be just with God? He goes, I sure don't know how, because I've been really working at it. That kind of remind you of that Jew? He's been working at it, but then when the righteousness of God shows up, they reject him. See, that doesn't make any sense. There's something wrong. The Jewish people steeped in religion, they get steeped in religion instead of relationship. That's a problem. Hey, that's a problem for Baptists. You get so steeped in the religion and the church polity, the custom and manner and tradition of things, that you forget about the relationship. And a lot of people fall into that. He says in verse 3 and 4, if he will contend with him, if man contend with God, he cannot answer him one of 1,000. It's kind of hard to argue with God when he's got all the answers. He is wise in heart and mighty in strength, who hath hardened himself against him and hath prospered. Well, let's see. It was the Pharisees and Sadducees that contended with the Lord. I mean, the ones that supposedly are the representatives of God on the earth were the ones contending with the very God they say they represented. You say, what's the problem? Religion instead of relationship. If they'd have had relationship, he said, you would have known me. If you knew my Father, you would have known me. And it was true. They didn't know him because all they had was, and Jews are like that today, man. I mean, all you got to do is look at a Jewish community and what they go through, and it's nothing but a bunch of, do it this way. You do it this way and only this way. Why? Because that's what the book says. That's what the Torah says. That's what whatever it is they're following, the Kabbalah or whatever it is. I don't know what all they follow. But they follow that's cookie cutter thing, but it has nothing to do with the relationship. There are atheist Jews that keep the Sabbath, that keep the feast days. Why? They don't even believe in God, yet they keep them. Well, it's tradition. Well, you remember what Jesus Christ said about tradition? And what did he say about tradition? I can't remember the verse. Yes, you make the word of non-effect. You make the word of God of non-effect through your traditions. That's kind of like how it goes. Thank you for that. It says, who will contend with him? He cannot answer him one of 1,000. When Jesus Christ shows up, he answers nearly all, I'm going to say nearly all the questions fired at him. And they're hitting him with all kinds of questions. And man, he's got an answer for everything. Now, there's only, in one occasion I can see here, he doesn't answer them, but that's because they won't answer him. But look at Mark chapter 3, verse 4. And by the way, let me read you this verse in Matthew 21:23 about the Pharisees and Sadducees. It says, when he was coming to the temple, the chief priests and elders of the people came unto him as he was teaching, okay, and said, by what authority doest thou these things, and who gave thee this authority? See, that was the whole issue. The issue is, it's always about authority. In the home, it's about authority. In the church, it's about authority. In government, it's about authority. It's who's going to run who. And they didn't like the fact that this guy shows up, didn't come from their rabbinical schools, He's not a Levite. He's from the tribe of Judah, and he's claiming to be the Messiah. What gives? But they didn't bother to think. If they'd have known the Scriptures, believed the Scriptures, not just knew them, but believed them, they would have said, hey, this guy's got all the credentials. He said, what Jesus said? If you won't believe me for the word's sake, believe me for the work's sake. If I'm doing the works, you need to believe it. If I come and I'm fulfilling everything that says back there, then why are you doubting it? And he was. He had the signs and wonders. So in Mark 3:4, it saith unto them, is it lawful to do good on the Sabbath day or to do evil, to save life or to kill? But they held their peace. He's not asking them questions that they can't answer. Well, yes, he is. It's not because they don't know the answer. It's because they can't answer because they're guilty. They're very guilty. And he knows that. If they answer him, yeah, it's right to do right on the Sabbath, then why have you got a problem with me healing somebody on the Sabbath day? You look like an idiot. You know, I mean, if you answer yes, you look like an idiot. I mean, if it's your kid he was healing, would you have a problem with him healing on the Sabbath day? If that Pharisee has a horse or a goat or a cow that falls into a ditch, you know what he'll do? He'll pull him out on the Sabbath day. I'm sure they have to water the animals. They have to feed the animals. It's not like everything stops on the Sabbath day. You got to feed your own face on the Sabbath day. You may have prepared everything, you still have to shovel it in your mouth. And they were getting on him because he healed somebody. He did something good. That's religion for you. Look in Mark chapter 11. Here's another question he asked them. They don't answer. Now later on, we're going to find out where the Lord asked Job a bunch of questions. He can't answer not one of them either. In Mark chapter 11, verse 30 to 33, it says, the baptism of John, was it from heaven or of men? Answer me. I like that part. Answer me. Tell me. And they reasoned with themselves, saying, if we shall say from heaven, he will say, why then did you not believe him? But if we shall say of men, they feared the people, for all men counted John that he was a prophet indeed. And they answered and said unto Jesus, we cannot tell. Gutless, spineless, worms. We cannot tell. And Jesus answering saith unto them, neither do I tell you by what authority I do these things. Man, that's the ultimate answer. I mean, you read that, you're just like, whoa. He says, you can't answer me? I won't answer you. That's the one I was telling you about. He wouldn't answer him. There's not a question he can't answer. He just wouldn't answer him. He says, you're not going to answer me, I'm not going to answer you. Look at Matthew chapter 22. Matthew 22, verse 45 and 46. You know, if they'd have been listening, they would have known by what authority. He said whatever the Father commanded him to say and do, he did. That's what he kept stating. I'm here to do the Father's work, fulfill the work, do the work. I mean, what part of that didn't you understand? That it was the Father that gave him the authority. But they're not listening. All they can see is that everybody's going after him. And they're going to put an end to that. Matthew 22, verse 45 and 46. If David then call him Lord, how is he his son? Now this is out of the book of Psalms. So, if he's the son of David, but David calls him Lord, how is he then his son? And no man was able to answer him a word, neither durst any man from that day forth ask him any more questions. He put the quash on that. You say, what's it? Well, he's the Lord from heaven. That's the reason why David called him Lord. And he's the son of David. Look at Romans 3:19. Now, can you imagine how this thing's going to go at the white throne? If while he's on this earth and he's in a man's body, he puts him to shame. Can you imagine what it would be like at the white throne? In Romans 3:19 it says, now we know that whatsoever the law saith, it saith to them who are under the law, what's that? That every mouth may be stopped and all the world may become guilty before God. Somehow people think that, they think in their mind they've got this reason. They actually think they have an argument against God. And I'm not saying that doesn't pass through everybody's mind. When things happen you don't understand, when things happen you don't want to happen, when things happen that they scare you, you start arguing with God. And you think you have a good argument. Okay? But God ultimately has the ultimate argument. He knows everything from the beginning to the end and you don't. He sees everything from a vantage point that you don't. And you're just second guessing God's what you're doing. It doesn't make, I'm not saying that makes it any easier what you're going through, But you just have to learn to say, okay, I trust you with it. You have to. God knows. We say we have faith, we believe this book, but then the issues of life that we face, all of a sudden, man, we're questioning that. See, that's the problem that's the problem that everybody's got in Christianity today, is not having that relationship with God to believe Him and trust Him. It's one, I know you got some head knowledge. You can have all kinds of head knowledge and no faith. And that can be the problem. Look in Proverbs chapter 20. Look at verse 8 to 10. I thought this kind of interesting. There's a verse here that goes with Proverbs 20, verse 8. He says, a king that sitteth in the throne of judgment scattereth away all evil with his eyes. Now, I know why that's going to be true. It says his eyes are as a flame of fire. And in verse 9 it says, who can say, I have made my heart clean, I am pure from my sin? Well, no one can. You can't make your own heart clean. And you can't say that you're pure from your sin. I'm talking about of yourself. Because of Christ you can, because of His blood. But you can't do it yourself. But look what he says there in verse 10. Isn't that kind of wild? He says, divers weights and divers measures, both of them are alike abomination to the Lord. There's going to be a lot of issues that nobody ever thought about that comes up before God and that deal with divers weights and divers measures. Has anybody ever recently bought a half a gallon of ice cream? You know why? Because they reduced it in size and they're charging you the same price. Sometimes they even raise the price and reduce the size of it. You don't have the same volume in there, do you? They're going to pay for that. But that, there used to be a sandwich shop that I really liked. I mean, they had one of the sandwiches, and it was expensive. I mean, it cost a few dollars for that sandwich, but man, they loaded it up, man. And I mean, it had such a great taste, and I loved it. And I go back there again, and all of a sudden, man, it had like half the amount of meat on it. And they're charging at least that or more than what they were before. You know what? Don't change the quality of something. You can change the price. If I want it, I'll buy it. But don't change the quality of it. I hate it when they do that. How many places have done that? I mean, we watch the hamburger shrink to almost, you got to lift up the bun and, get out a magnifying glass to find the burger. Why? It keeps shrinking. They keep taking this and that out of it. I mean, the big rumor that McDonald's getting so cheap they were using earthworms. I mean, you remember that? You all remember that? They weren't, but they accused them of using horse meat and kangaroo, everything under the sun to cut cost, I guess. Huh? Yeah, now they're using plants, which, by the way, you better remember one thing about all that stuff. It's full of estrogens. Full of estrogens. So when you start eating that stuff, just be aware of that. You probably get enough of that and everything else. You don't need any more of it. You need meat. Divers weights and divers measures, both of them are alike abomination to the Lord. One of these days, God's going to be judging folks. Believe it or not, the currency thing that's going on right now has to do with divers weights and divers measures. And we're inflating our currency. We're hurting everybody around the world. Anyway, and remember when a widow cries out, she ain't got enough money. When orphans and widows cry out, God answers. He says there, he is wise in heart and mighty in strength. Who hath hardened himself against him and hath prospered? Well, where Job is, no one on the other side of the flood that hardened their heart prospered, did they? They perished. On the other side of Job, Pharaoh hardened his heart. Did he prosper? No. He ends up losing his own life, but he loses the kingdom, at least loses it under his feet, and he loses his son. He didn't prosper. Lucifer certainly hasn't prospered from hardening himself against God. Now you say, well, I don't know about that. Well, he's been on a downward trajectory since Genesis 1:2. Yeah, he's got something going on one planet in a big old universe. Maybe you want to call that a big deal. I call that small potatoes. I think God calls that small potatoes. I realize we're in that small potato. But, If you think about it, it could have been a lot worse. It could have been half populated, or we could have had 100 planets full of billions of people, and this thing called sin breaks out. I mean, who knows what could have happened? But the Lord's got this thing kind of quarantined, like a virus, quarantined on the back of an S-shaped nebula, and He's taking care of it. But Lucifer, Satan, he just keeps going down, 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 down. Finally winds up in the lake of fire. He hardened himself against God, and he's not going to prosper. And the thing is, neither will you if you harden your heart. Lost out there, they can go ahead. Go ahead and do whatever you think. Do whatever you want. Won't change one word how this thing's going to turn out. Not one. And that's what Job's saying. He says, whoever hardened himself against God and prospered? Nobody. Well, you can't answer him 1 of 1,000. Thing is, Job, and there's the thing, man. This thing keeps going along and Job's still, being combative. He doesn't even believe what he's saying. No, he believes it. He just doesn't, it's not heartfelt, because at the very end, God starts, we're going to get into some things here, some things that Job states, and there's some of the very questions, or they contain some of the very questions he's getting asked in Job 37, and 38, and 39, and 40, or 38 to 41, I think it is. He gets asked, so what's going on? Well, evidently, it's in the head and not in the heart. There's a lot of verses like that. You ever notice that? You got one in your head, and then all of a sudden the Lord gets it in your heart. And that's when it starts to make a difference. I mean, you've known the verse for years, but all of a sudden the Lord really applies the thing. Look at verse 5, and I'm going to read to verse 10. We're not even going to get through all these verses, but it says, which removeth the mountains, and they know not, which overturneth them in his anger, which shaketh the earth out of her place, and the pillars thereof tremble, which commandeth the sun, it riseth not, and sealeth up the stars, which alone spreadeth out the heavens, and treadeth upon the waves of the sea, which maketh Arcturus, Orion, and Pleiades, and the chambers of the south, which doth great things past finding out, yea, and wonders without number. And that's Job talking. And there's some great things there. And we're going to see some of this come up in Job 38 to 41. Yet Job confesses them here, showing that a head knowledge without heart obedience is just useless knowledge. So you can have a head knowledge of something, but if you're not obedient to that, it's just useless. I will say this, though. There is a difference between what's being asked of him in Job 38 to 41 and what Job is stating here. Almost a good majority of Job 38 to 41 is about the creation. And what does the creation declare? The glory of God. Almost everything that he mentions here is a tribulation phenomenon, and it's judgment. And I think that's another thing. I don't have a problem with the world seeing God as a God of judgment and hellfire and damnation. They need to, because why? They need to fear the Lord. I already fear Him. And sometimes, we'll get it in our heart, or we'll get it in our mind that, this God of judgment is just beating the tar out of us. And a lot of times, something is happening, but you don't know why. Sometimes you might know, maybe you're not living right and God's correcting you, but He's just correcting you. And sometimes we'll look at Him as a God of judgment instead of the God that loves us. And one thing is for sure, that He does love us. And nothing can separate us from the love of God, which is in Christ Jesus. So that's part of that relationship thing, where you know that whatever's going on, God loves you. He does love you. He does love me. He can't but love us. Now, that lost world out there, I don't think He's got any love for it. Nothing. If it's in Christ, that's where it is. That's where you'll find it. If you don't find Christ, you don't find the love of God. The wrath of God abideth on you. And one of these days, that thing's going to fall. You know what Job can only see? Now look, God been good to you most of your life, then all of a sudden something falls out. What do? Get mad at God, Look how you're treating me? Well, you got a whole life. God saved you, saved your wife, saved your kids. You see what I'm saying? All of a sudden now He's the villain. I know sometimes we don't understand, and I'll be the first to tell you that sometimes my mouth gets ahead of my faith. But I recognize that it's not right for me to go accusing God when He's been very good to me. I mean, if I start falling apart physically, it's not like I didn't deserve it. I mean, I used to be a smoker. Mr. Jog 5 miles a day. And if it ever happens, it's because I'm being chased. And I gave up after a mile. But, it's not like I didn't deserve what's coming. And just because I'm a sinner, I deserve what's coming. Just try to keep it in my mind that, okay, Lord, if I trust you then in the good times, I need to trust you in the bad times. If I can trust you on a sunny day, I need to be able to trust you in the storm. You're the same God. Whether it's daylight or dark, whether it's cloudy or sunshine, and He's still the same God. And guess what? He loves you just as much in either condition. So you just have to believe that whatever's going on, it's for His glory and for your betterment. That's what it says. He does things for your profit. And I think they're on the eternal scale. So a lot of times, we can't understand this suffering we're going through. Well, what do we know about suffering? If we suffer, we'll reign with Him. Well, He's got to bring it on sometime. We think the restaurants are closed. We're just suffering. These first world problems. Third world, they don't even have restaurants. Anyway, look at verse 5. We'll talk about the first one here. Which removeth the mountains, and they know not, which overturneth them in His anger. Turn to Isaiah 64. This is definitely Second Advent. It says in Isaiah 64, verse 1, He says, "Oh, that thou wouldest rend the heavens, that thou wouldest come down, that the mountains might flow down at thy presence." He's talking about these mountains melting. "As when the melting fire burneth, and the fire causeth the waters to boil, and to make thy name known to thine adversaries, that the nations may tremble at thy presence." Oh, he's here. That's why they're trembling. "When thou didst terrible things which we looked not for, thou camest down. The mountains flowed down at thy presence." Man, at the Second Advent, there's going to be events that have never happened on this earth. Now, the next one, look at Revelation 16. And this one may be in a particular location. We may not be talking about all the mountains, but then again, we might be. But I know where the area he's talking about here is right around that great city, Jerusalem. And they've got some mountains. They got some mountains that separate them from their enemies. They got, there's all kinds of mountains in that area. I don't know the mountain ranges, but I'm sorry, but I've seen the maps. There's mountains all around Israel. In Revelation 16, verse 18 to 20, it says, "And there were voices and thunders and lightnings, and there was a great earthquake. Such was not since men were upon the earth, so mighty an earthquake and so great." So it's got to be above a 10 on the Richter scale. "And the great city was divided into 3 parts. And the cities of, look at this, and the cities of the nations fell." I mean, this is the whole earth shaking here. The cities of the nations, think about the cities of the nations. New York, Toronto, Sydney, Beijing, Moscow. Is that what he's talking about? The cities of the nations. They fell. Can you imagine that? An earthquake that strong that it devastates every major city on the planet. It says, "And great Babylon came in remembrance before God to give unto her the cup of the wine of the fierceness of His wrath." Look at this. "And every island fled away." There goes England. Isn't Australia considered an island? Huh? Well, I know, but I think it's still, I don't know. England's an island nation. Is Australia considered an island too? Yeah. I mean, might not be anything left other than the 3 continents, and I don't know, maybe there'll be North and South America, I guess. But he said, "And every island fled away, and the mountains were not found." If he's talking worldwide, can you even imagine that in your mind? I mean, I flew over the Alps, and I don't know how many mountain ranges we flew over, going back and forth over to Europe. Let me tell you something, there's a lot of mountains out there. A lot of mountains. He's talking about leveling everything. You talk about some power. He reshaped his whole earth. Excuse me. Look at verse 6. He says in verse 6, which shaketh the earth out of her place, and the pillars thereof tremble. Turn to Isaiah 24. Isaiah 24, look at verse 19 to 21. It says, see, this is all Second Advent. At least it looks like that's the application of it. We'll make one more application of it. It says, the earth is utterly broken down. The earth is clean dissolved. The earth is moved exceedingly. The earth shall reel to and fro like a drunkard, and shall be removed like a cottage, and transgression thereof shall be heavy upon it, and it shall fall and not rise again. And it shall come to pass in that day that the Lord shall punish the host of the high ones that are on high, and the kings of the earth upon the earth. I mean, talk about this thing shaking. I mean, earthquake. I guess this earthquake's so powerful, man, you can't even walk. That's how powerful it is. But he's going to just take the thing and shake it. Isaiah 13:13 says, therefore I will shake the heavens, and the earth shall remove out of her place in the wrath of the Lord of hosts in the day of his fierce anger. See, all this, everything that Job's mentioned so far is about judgment. It's about judgment, and it's about the his future coming. Now, I did think of this, though. Could make an application to this to Noah's flood, where the earth is thrown off her axis, moved out of her place, and you do know that the earth wobbles as it orbits around the sun, right? I mean, like, I read this thing, these scientists think that man is partly responsible for the wobble, okay? Yeah. Probably it's Baptist too, you know, because we tend to be a little bit overweight. But I'm thinking to myself, I think it might be water. I mean, you know, all this water, and then, I mean, you know, water is 8 pounds per gallon. You do know that. And then with the salt content, it's probably more than that. I mean, it's a lot of weight. I think the thing's off balance. Well, we just got done talking about the Lord coming back and leveling things and removing islands and weight distribution. Why? Because a false balance is an abomination. So he puts the environment back into balance, straightens up man, if he just straightens up, we're at a tilt. That's the reason why we got all these seasons and everything. He puts that thing right. Well, a lot of things will be right on this planet just because he got the thing leveled and spinning just right. So he has to do kind of a weight distribution. But it's the water. What do you think threw it off in the first place? Like a bunch of water? Threw it off its axis? You know, daylight and dark, I think we're like, I don't know what it's like, 4 seconds? 4 seconds difference, I think, per day. Is it 4 seconds or 4 minutes? No. 4 minutes? Is it really that much?
It's not quite 4 minutes.
Okay.
I think it's like
3 minutes and so many seconds?
6 or something.
Okay. So, which shaketh the earth out of her place, that happened with the flood, and the pillars thereof tremble, and it just kind of wobbles as it goes around. Anyway, but that's mainly going to be Second Advent when he comes back. Boy, talk about being shaken, having a difficult time moving around. The Lord's going to, and then all the mountains and all the cities falling. You imagine, the utter devastation. It's just mind-boggling. For 1,000 years, you know what we'll be doing. Do you know after the Advent, it takes 7 years to bury the dead? 7 years. And I think that might just be in Palestine. Why? Because you got 200 million men coming up there to have a battle. And he utterly destroys them. We'll be able to employ a lot of people just burying dead bodies. I can't think of the verse where that is, but there's a verse on it somewhere. Verse 7, it says, which commandeth the sun, and it riseth not, and sealeth up the stars. Well, now, he's talking about a darkness here because the sun doesn't come up. And this darkness happened in Egypt, and it's going to repeat in the trib. Exodus 10, verse 21 to 22 says, and the Lord said unto Moses, stretch out thine hand toward heaven, that there may be darkness over the land of Egypt, even darkness which may be felt. And Moses stretched forth his hand toward heaven, and there was a thick darkness in the land of Egypt 3 days. Now that was localized, at least it was in that area there. It didn't say it was over the whole earth. But in Revelation 6:12, and I beheld, when he had opened the sixth seal, and lo, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth of hair. Now I meant to look that up, sackcloth of hair. I don't know what that's in reference to, but I think I used to know, but I don't know now. But it's dark, it's black. And it says, and the moon became as blood. Then in Revelation 16:10, it says, the fifth angel poured out his vial upon the seat of the beast, and his kingdom was full of darkness, and they gnawed their tongues for pain. So he says, which commandeth the sun that riseth not. And it says, and sealeth up the stars. Okay. Since he's talking about the sun, I believe he may be talking about the planets. Okay? The celestial bodies that are out there in the universe. But I'll give you this. Let's see. Revelation 12:4 says, if he's talking about the angels, this is where he seals up the sum. And his tail drew a third part of the stars of heaven, and did cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the one which was ready to be delivered to devour her child as soon as it was born. Well, there's where he knows the number. The ones that left and the ones that remain, that's it. He sealeth up the sum. Or he sealeth up the stars. I'm just making it's an application there. Judges 5:20 says they fought from heaven, the stars in their courses fought against Sisera. Well, I don't think he's talking about suns and planets fighting or anything. He's talking about spiritual beings, angels. They're referenced to stars. But let's say it has to do with celestial bodies in the heavens. Then it may be when he says he sealeth up the stars, he conceals all their light. Okay? Isaiah 13:9-11. Turn there. I think this is probably the verse that gives it a little bit more, give us a little bit more understanding of what he's talking about there, since he is talking about the sun. It says, behold, the day of the Lord cometh, cruel, verse 9-11. Behold, the day of the Lord cometh, both cruel with wrath and fierce anger, to lay the land desolate. He shall destroy the sinners thereof out of it. For the stars of heaven and the constellations, which he's going to mention a few as we go along here, and the constellations thereof shall not give their light. The sun shall be darkened in his going forth, and the moon shall not cause her light to shine. And I will punish the world for their evil, and the wicked for their iniquity, and I will cause the arrogancy of the proud to cease, and will lay low the haughtiness of the terrible. So, before the Lord comes back, the lights go out. And I mean when they go out, they go out. And it'd be like you groping in the dark, not knowing where anything is. And it says they gnaw their tongue for pain. I'm thinking, why don't they just drink water? You try finding water with absence of light. You couldn't make your way out of this room. You'd have a hard time. Maybe you could find the door, but after you got outside the door, you'd be hard pressed. Have you ever been in zero light? I told you I went to Mammoth Caves and they turned out the lights. I'm like, whoa. I was frozen. Couldn't move. Could not move. Especially in terrain that I wasn't familiar with. I couldn't move an inch. I was afraid to move. And when the Bible talks about chains of darkness, I understand that now. So, Again, something Job mentions here, it looks like it deals with judgment. Let me finish verse 8. It says, which alone spreadeth out the heavens and treadeth upon the ways of the sea. I guess at one time we could say that our universe was expanding. I'm not sure that it is now because he's spreading out the heavens. That kind of shows expansion. There's a big question whether the universe is expanding or contracting at the present. Somebody comes along and says it's expanding, from the Big Bang, if you believe that. And then some say it's contracting because, God says he's done with it. And there's probably a verse for all of it. Isaiah 40:22 says, it is he that sitteth upon the circle of the earth, and the inhabitants thereof are as grasshoppers, that stretcheth out the heavens as a curtain, and spreadeth them out as a tent to dwell in. Isaiah 44:24 says, thus saith the Lord thy Redeemer, and he that formed thee from the womb, I am the Lord that maketh all things, that stretcheth forth the heavens alone, and spreadeth abroad the earth by myself. Nobody else did it. It was me. You need to read Isaiah 44, 45, 46, 47. It's the Lord arguing when people say, hey, there's no other God. I don't see any other God around. Because I did this. I made this by myself. I think we got some transfer going on in the parking lot there. I've been looking out there. So, he said, I did this. I spread abroad the earth by myself. So what does America do? We name a space program after the god of destruction, Apollyon. And now they've named it after his twin sister, Artemis. You might know her as Diana of Ephesus. The SpaceX, be careful about words that end in X. SpaceX rocket, the name they gave it is the Dragon's Capsule. The Dragon Capsule. And the astronauts are the Dragon's crew. And I saw their outfits, and sure enough, there's a dragon logo or a dragon insignia on there. And all the ones that were prepping it were all dressed in black. Huh? And they're going, I'm telling you, man. I mean, talk about thumbing your nose at God. He said, I created all that by myself. I did that. So what do? We just name an entire space program after false gods. I was waiting for the launch because I thought, this could get very interesting. And then it kind of just, Lord said, you know what? I'm not even going to let you launch today. Yeah. We'll see what happens. Just about that time we get this haughtiness, that somehow we're going to go out there and I'll tell you what, we got dominion on this earth. We don't have dominion out there. And I'll tell you, there's some evil out there. He said the heavens are unclean in his sight. You don't want to get out there. You might bring something back with you, or as some of the astronauts found out, you're getting followed while you're out there. Here they are looking out the window, and there's another craft following them as they're orbiting around the earth. How come they didn't tell us about that? And it took years for them to tell us. I think on their deathbed, some of these astronauts are telling stories about what really happened. That they looked out and they were being followed by another craft. Anyway, the present universe is slated for demolition. In Hebrews chapter 1, verse 10 to 12, it says, Thou, Lord, in the beginning hast laid the foundation of the earth, and the heavens are the works of thine hands. They shall perish, but thou remainest. They all shall wax old and doth a garment. And as a vesture shalt thou fold them up, and they shall be changed. But thou art the same, and thy years shall not fail. Dr. Ruckman talks about this, and it just blows my mind the way he described this thing. On the back of a dollar bill, that little pyramid thing. You see the capstone separated from the rest of it. If you were to put a man's face there, it look like a man's wearing a poncho, right? Do you know that's the description of what Jesus Christ is wearing that they take off of him at the foot of the cross? and nail him up there naked? It says about it in John chapter 19, then the soldiers, when they had crucified Jesus, took his garments and made 4 parts, to every soldier a part, and also his coat was without seam, woven from the top throughout. That's why they couldn't divide it. They just had to cast lots for it, because it would have ruined the garment. So it was like, if it's woven throughout, his head sticks out the top of it, and it just comes down like this, like almost, if you just spread it out, it'd be like a pyramid. And he's the head of the corner. You know what they did? They stripped the Creator naked. When they took that garment off him, when they took those garments off him, they stripped the Creator naked. Do you know what God does at the end? You see, the universe is his garment. It's his vesture. He says, you want to see me naked? I'll show you naked. And when he exposes himself, man, the whole thing just... That's what's happening. Here Jesus Christ is the very picture of that thing on the cross, where they stripped the Creator naked. That outfit, that thing, that vesture is a very picture of the universe. And God says, I'm wearing it. And one of these days, because the world wanted to put my son on display naked, he goes, I'll show you naked. And once he exposes himself, the whole thing just burns with a fervent heat. 2 Peter chapter 3. All right. He says he treads upon the waves of the sea. And I've got some more work to do on that. But I was thinking of Habakkuk 3:15 says, thou didst walk through the sea with thine horses, through the heap of great waters. You know, you have a picture back there in the book of Exodus when they crossed the Red Sea. That Red Sea is a picture of the great deeps. You all understand what I mean by the great deeps? Above our universe, there is a body of water that literally encapsulates our universe. And it's the buffer between us and God Almighty. When he rolls that away, look out. Well, evidently doors open up in that thing, and the Lord can go in and out of that, or something goes in and out of that. But anyway, it's just like that Red Sea, man. It has to part. And he talks about horses going through there. Thou just walk through the sea with thine horses, through the heap of great water. There's going to be a day when we're going to come back through there, coming down on horses and going through that great deep. He's not talking about the Atlantic or the Pacific. It's a greater, bigger body of water. Another picture of that is when Jesus shows up walking on the water. And he's talking about the watch of the night that he shows up in. Everything's a picture of that Advent. When he comes walking through, he makes his way through that great deep with the armies of heaven behind him. That's the picture. So it says he treads upon the waves of the sea, but he's not talking about just, the little ocean we got out there. So everything that Paul has mentioned so far, and the reason we're going to stop is to tackle the next one. I need to do a little bit of research, but and that's about Arcturus, Orion, Pleiades, and the chambers of the south. Anyway, that'll be fun. But all of them have to deal with the Advent, and all of them have to deal with judgment. Whereas the Lord wants to remind Job about the creation. Eventually when the thing does get turned back around, it's going to be a beautiful creation. It's going to be a wonderful time of joy and happiness, and you can't even fathom that. I guess we have to put things in, we give God the praise all the time for this, that. Thank the Lord for this, that. Then something bad comes along, and all of a sudden we get critical of God. Now, I'll give it to you. I'm glad I'm not in Job's shoes. And you know what? I stand back when some people are going through something. I just say, I'm glad it ain't me, Lord. I don't know if I could do it. And I'm being honest. I just say, I'm glad it ain't me. So, but I don't want to forget the good things God's done. Then all of a sudden, because everything starts going south, which, it's going to, right? You live long enough, it's going to go south on you. And it can go south on you even when you're young. It can happen. But also, the Lord's been awful good to me. I don't know about the rest of you, but I know about me. And he's been awful good to me. So, I want to keep that fresh in my mind as things start going the other way. And you remember, I just turned 60. You all know that now? So anyway, any questions about what we covered tonight? Okay. If there's no questions, let's take some prayer requests.